October 26, 1953. Out of the snow, an image. For the first time ever, the Tri-Cities had local TV. But this was more than that. This represented a young man's dream, a victory over almost insurmountable obstacles. 60 years later, this is the story of how it happened. 338 East Main Street, downtown Johnson City, Tennessee. Built in the 30s as a federal post office, but inside...
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, on the open, stand by.
State of the art. A 24/7 television and internet news, information, and entertainment hub. In this building, the person who presses a button has a lot of power. The ability to go live on television on the web instantaneously. To enter 335,000 homes on televisions, on any screen really, anywhere you go. But have you ever wondered how all of this began? To find the answer to that question, you have to go back in time, to a different era before television even came to be. Back to the 1930s, America, still reeling from a war and now worrying about another one on the way. Business is booming for some, but for others, it's a bust. Others, like this man.
Haynes Lancaster Sr. lived in Chattanooga. He had an automotive parts business, and due to some federal regulations, some changes there, and he didn't agree with, his business kind of went by the wayside, and he had to figure out what he was going to do. He needed money. They were living in rental property, lost their home. So this gentleman, Jay Birdwell, approached Haynes Sr. about a radio station, a possible radio station here in the Tri-Cities. And in Haynes Lancaster Jr.'s words, he said it was a crapshoot.
The gamble worked. After a competition to get a license, WJHL radio went on the air. And the HL in WJHL once again was a hit. It was a Christmas greeting from the radio staff in the newspaper. People listened, but one of the listeners had a different plan, and he was the boss's son, Haynes Lancaster Jr. Like so many in his generation, war had a way of messing everything up. World War II took Haynes Jr. around the world on the crew of a B-29 bomber. Somehow he survived, and after the war, Haynes Jr. came home and went to work for his dad.
He was the sales manager, and he had this inkling of, I think I really want to pursue the television side of this. That was up and coming. He knew it. And I think that that's amazing, you know. That's one thing I really appreciate about Haynes, is that he was able to just foresee these things. And he knew all the right people.
But this was the late 40s. Most homes didn't even have a TV. So Lancaster would have to do some convincing.
He told his father that he would really like to investigate getting into the television business. And his father didn't want to do it. He didn't know anything about it. He was uncomfortable with it, and he just did not want to get into that conversation with him.
There was a lot of skepticism. People weren't sure it was going to work. From an investment standpoint, it didn't, there wasn't anything proven as to whether it was a good idea or not.
But Haynes did not give up.
And in what would be a theme for the rest of his life, persistence paid off.
He got all these people on board. He went to his father and he said, I've got all these people interested. They're going to take stock in this. I want to form my own corporation. And his father said, well, if you've gone to this much trouble and you've done all this work, let's just put it under my corporation and let's get started with this.
But neither Haynes Lancaster Jr. nor his father could ever have imagined that in pursuit of this dream, they'd come close to losing everything all over again, even their very lives and the lives of their employees.
WJHL, celebrating 60 years.
WJHL Radio. From the heart of downtown Johnson City, the owner, Haynes Lancaster Sr., knew he made the right move, coming to Johnson City, fighting to get a license, and now reaping the rewards. But if he wished for a quiet life with his son, Haynes Lancaster Jr., just following along, well, that was not going to happen.
He told his father that he would really like to investigate getting into the television business. And his father didn't want to do it. He didn't know anything about it. He was uncomfortable with it, and he just did not want to get into that conversation with him. But Haynes did not give up.
In 1948, the Lancasters took the plunge. They formally applied with the federal government for a television broadcast license in the Tri-Cities. And they had a plan to be the first television station in Tennessee. But in the first of what would soon become a series of big snags, that plan came to a screeching halt.
He got a response that there had been a freeze. There had been a freeze, an FCC freeze. It was called the Freeze of 48.
Dr. Carrie Swaney is a professor of communications at Milligan College. She worked as WJHL's production manager, and she chronicled the history of the station.
What had happened is after the war, there had been so many applications for television stations that they realized that there were just too many stations, they were too close together, and they were just going to have to rework things. And so they needed time to do, the FCC needed time to do that, so they just stopped the application process. And it took 4.5 years, close to 4.5 years, before he was able to continue with the process.
Finally, in January 1953, Haynes Lancaster Jr. got the word he'd been waiting for: license granted. With a power of more than 300,000 watts, the eventual capability of reaching homes all around the Appalachians, WJHL TV was going to happen. The location for the TV studio and a 550-foot tower, Johnson City's Tannery Knob near downtown. In 1953, construction got underway on the station's Hilltop studio, and it quickly became news. There was no local TV in the Tri-Cities in those days. By some accounts, there were only a few thousand television sets. So as work happened on the Hill, in town the Lancasters got to work convincing people to buy TVs. But that was the least of Haynes Jr.'s problems up on Tannery Knob, where crews were at work building that TV tower. For the Lancasters, it once again was a trip to the financial edge.
It was $48,000 to erect this 550-foot tower. They had to have the money up front. That was a lot of money. And I asked Haynes Jr., I said, was that a lot of money back then? He said any amount of money was a lot of money.
After repeated problems with the first tower, it was abandoned. Another was ordered, and it got lost in delivery. A newspaper photographer took this picture of Haynes Lancaster Sr. The photograph caption said he was, quote, tearing his hair. Finally, by the start of fall 1953, everyone seemed on track. September 26th, local news reported headline, WJHL telecast slated October 11th. WJHL TV is going on the air, Lancaster said. The newspaper raved of camera magic and printed this photo of Patty Smithdeal, WJHL TV's first program production manager. She still remembers the urgency of the day.
No question, never a question, never a doubt. We were going to go on the air, period.
But construction delays persisted, and questions from advertisers, even from the public, began to be an issue. So Haynes Lancaster Jr. took out an ad with the paper. Memo from WJHL. Due to conditions beyond our control, we're forced to change the programming date of Saturday, October 24th. The ad even said, barring any unforeseen accidents. October 17, 1953, that unforeseen became a terrifying reality.
Hi, I'm Charlie Rose with CBS This Morning. Congratulations to WJHL on 60 years of broadcasting.
It really was true. In the late 40s and early 50s, the eyes of East Tennessee were on Channel 11. Local radio station owner Haynes Lancaster Sr. and his son were in a race to put the region's first television station on the air. The studio and tower would be on Tannery Knob downtown, and by October 1953, they were almost there. Studio almost built, tower almost up. But then, October 17th, something happened that changed everything. Haynes Jr. was handling last-minute business downtown. Production manager Patty Fulton had gone out on errands. And Haynes Sr., along with about 20 employees, were at WJHL TV on Tannery Knob, where the tower had almost reached its target, 550 feet.
They were putting the last pieces of the tower together, and a guy wire snapped and created this whipping motion back and forth that went on for several minutes. The tower began to fall, and parts of the tower landed on the ground and on the building.
I heard somebody say there was a big something about the tower had fallen. I think I maybe got in the car and tried it, and they said the tower had fallen. I couldn't get up the hill.
Haynes Jr.'s first thought, his father. The man he talked into going through all this was in that building.
Dad was in the station on Tannery when it fell, and when that thing started down, they dove in behind some stacked stuff in there and didn't get hurt at all.
In fact, despite massive steel beams impaling a building full of people, only 2 people were hurt. The paper reported the injuries weren't bad.
It is a miracle that no one was killed. A flat-out miracle.
Tannery Knob television tower toppled, screamed the newspaper headline, and quoted Lancaster as saying damage was extensive. For the son with a big dream, this was a nightmare that could have been so much worse. After all, no one had died or had even been critically injured, and key equipment had survived.
The tower fell, and it was 3 inches away from the transmitter equipment. So just a little bit more, and they would have lost all their transmitter equipment as well. But as was the case, that was fine.
The Johnson City Press-Chronicle called it hard luck in the nth degree and extended its full sympathy to its friendly competitor, WJHL. The writer said, quote, "It's our wish that there may be enough reward once WJHL TV is on the air and going to compensate for all the headache and heartache experienced along the way."
I think that the whole process just became a series of events, and so everybody in the community was really concerned with, are they going to get on the air? When are they going to get on the air? We know this disaster happened. It just seems to be one thing after another, and I think that the community got behind them and were really, wanting the station to get on quickly, and they were supportive of everything that happened.
Amidst a pile of rubble, Lancaster was at a crossroads. Could he continue? Would he continue? Looking back, it was never even a question.
Haynes Jr. was just like, we're going to do this. He picked up the phone and he called the J.E. Green Company in town and asked a friend, happened to be a friend, and said, I'm in a world of trouble. I need help. And so the gentleman came up, he got a foreman involved in it. They cleaned up all of the debris, the tower, and they tried to figure out what can we do to get on the air. They were now behind, and they were trying to get on as quickly as possible.
Tarp was stretched across the building to keep out rain, and work began on a makeshift, smaller tower. Another ad in the paper promised it. WJHL TV, Tri-Cities Television Channel 11 would present its first program Saturday, October 24th. But October 24th came and went. No WJHL TV. As crews worked non-stop to erect that tower on Tannery Knob, Lancaster drew a line in the sand. October 26th would be it, his day to make history.
WJHL celebrating 60 years.
October 26, 1953, after dodging total disaster when a 550-foot tower toppled on WJHL's studio full of staff, Haynes Lancaster Jr. was determined. This would be the day his station went on air. Giving up never entered his mind.
It was going to work. I never felt I was going to give up on it.
It would have been so easy to say, we're done, we're not going to invest anymore. But the Lancasters, they got back up and shook the dust off of them, and they got back to work.
A makeshift tower in place with help from a hastily called contact.
That was all based on a handshake. There was no contract involved.
And he came up and I says, by the way, you haven't told me yet what it's going to cost me.
The crowd gathered in the battered Tannery Knob studio.
The studio was just a big, huge, like a warehouse. And we had a boom mic. We didn't have these fancy little things you guys have. And so Haynes Jr. borrowed, stole, or got a telephone booth. And they put Herbert Howard in it, and he signed us on the air.
Friends still talk about Herb Howard's voice as a gift from God. A radio man since he was just a boy, it was Herb Howard's voice first heard on WJHL TV. We captured his memories of that day as the station celebrated its 40th year on the air.
Hello, I'm Herb Howard, Channel 11's first weatherman when WJHL TV went on the air in 1953. Our first weather map was a chalkboard. Weather graphics and electronic maps came along much later.
5 years after his plan first launched, Haynes Lancaster Jr. had launched WJHL TV. For real. People at home got local TV for the very first time. An image from just down the street. The dreamer's dream had come true.
Getting the station off the road and onto the air, getting it in business made me feel better than anything has in years.
This photo taken the night of October 26, 1953, moments after the station went on the air.
These were the pioneer days of television, and it was amazing to see how these important people kind of came together to support and put this all together. Otherwise, we wouldn't really have what we have now.
The Lancasters had a vision that not a lot of people could see, but they could see it, and they jumped on the opportunity, and thank goodness they did.
60 years later, Haynes Lancaster Jr. gives the credit to a person viewers never saw, his remarkable chief engineer.
We had a good engineer in the OK Girl, and he had never done it, but he understood everything about it. And OK, he didn't want anybody else, and he did everything he did was right.
The Johnson City Chamber of Commerce ran this ad. Congratulations, WJHL TV, first television station in the Tri-Cities area. But there was little time to celebrate or even think about the impact on history. Now, there was a show to put on. And for the people of WJHL, the hardest work was yet to come. If its birth was marked by frustration and near-deadly disaster, the toddler years of WJHL were pure raw energy. Tannery Knob wasn't the place where the tower fell anymore. It was the place where magic happened. 7 p.m. sharp, October 26, 1953, Herb Howard signed WJHL TV on the air, the first sponsor to ever air a commercial on WJHL TV, Free Service Tire.
I remember I was coming home from school and my dad said, we're going up to do the first TV commercial on the new television station. Would you like to go? I said, yeah, I'd like to go. So I stood up against the wall and watched.
And in the days and weeks that followed, people watched from home. Few homes even had a TV then, so the Lancasters didn't just have to build a TV station, they had to build an audience. But as word got out that the Tri-Cities had its own TV station, people clamored to buy TV sets. And in those days, Free Service Tire was in the TV sales business.
Of course, we always did a lot of radio advertising with them. And then, of course, when the television came on stream, it was a new way to meet the public, and we used it very aggressively.
Newscasters gathered around desks to talk about what was happening here. People from the Tri-Cities hosted shows featuring life in the Tri-Cities. You in their home, they in yours. Cowboys weren't just on horseback, they were helping sell shoes. And sometimes the camera pointed at you, and you could be on TV. Here's WJHL's Man on the Street in front of Dosser's department store in downtown Johnson City. The studio came to you. It's hard for the modern eye to conceive just how new and novel this whole TV thing was back then. But behind the scenes at Tannery Knob, it was far from glamorous. Patty Fulton was WJHL's first production manager.
I was just working myself to death and worrying about what it looked like and where camera was what and this, that, and lighting, and I didn't think about it. I just wanted to get the show on.
This generation that made it through a world war now fought a daily war just to keep the equipment running, to keep the sponsors happy, to feed the always hungry beast of airtime that had to be filled.
I was working like mad. All of us, we really put in the hours, and it was very stressful.
Why?
Well, we didn't know what we were doing. We were saved by the fact that not many people had sets. It was black and white TV, and not many people had TV in their homes.
Al Gregory joined WJHL in 1957. A New Yorker with dreams of being a pro baseball player, his voice destined him for radio and eventually a career that spanned decades at WJHL TV.
Well, everything we did was live. There was no videotape. We did shows back to back. I mean, it was really exciting. You had to be on the ball and move fast. I think back then we had more live shows back to back than we do today.
Gregory was there when WJHL's staff created everything, from the copy to the music, the sets to the art, and anything could and usually did happen.
Ilo Salia, we called, it was a Memo from Ilo was the name of the program. And she loved horses. She would bring horses into the studio. And sometimes it was messy. But it was very entertaining. We could start with early morning. We had a show called First Call with Ed McKinney. And it would be news, views, and interviews. Then we went on to 9 o'clock in the morning and we'd have programs designed for young children or preschoolers. We had a show called Mrs. Winkadink, the old lady who lived in a shoe, and she would read stories to children. We had a program in the afternoon. We would run Gunsmoke, and then at different segments within the program, we would have a live cowboy come on.
Like many local stations in that day, there was a clown named Bozo, WJHL's ambassador to children everywhere, even in the hospital. Here he was in a parade through Jonesboro. The music was live and the performers local. Some of them became stars. In those days, none bigger than Bonnie Lou and Buster. Late at night, the tone would turn scary. Horror movies and scenes like this acted out during commercial breaks in the studio. Advertisers, they put their products in the shows front and center. So the sundown kid often sold baby dolls or shoes, even stovetop popcorn. In time, the novelty of TV became part of the family's daily life.
It's like the paper, the daily paper you got. You watch the news, you watch both in the morning and at night. It was something that you didn't miss. It was a way to communicate all the things and happenings going on, not only in Johnson City, but from around the world and around the region.
Early on, the advertisers knew the audiences they needed to attract, and so did the programmers. Children with shows like Uncle Hank, whose Bible lessons would be drawn out live on paper, and women with programs like The Catherine Willis Show, one of the most popular shows in WJHL TV history.
She did news, interviews, she did cooking, she did sewing, she did flower arranging. She invited chefs to come in and prepare different recipes. A lot of what's going on today.
I started with WJHL TV in 1953. Anything that came along, if I thought it would interest the public, I did it.
The producer of that show, none other than Patty Fulton.
Now I'm going to tell you a secret. She wasn't much of a cook, but she could really interview and perform, and very lovable.
One day, the star, Catherine Willis, got sick, too sick to go on air. The station needed to fill in, and fast. So, Fulton hosted. and was so good she eventually went on to have her own cooking show on WJHL.
I do remember that I gave a commercial for JFG Coffee, because the reason I remember that is that when I picked up the cup and the saucer were shaking. I was so nervous.
You were scared to death. But you must have been good.
Well, nobody knew the difference.
And that's how a lot of careers in TV developed or even began in those days, especially for the people behind the scenes. Ed Jones came to WJHL in 1969.
I was at ETSU, and one of my friends was there sitting with another guy, and he asked, said, "You need a job?" I said, "Sure." And said, "This guy just quit at WJHL and there's a job available." So I drove down and talked to Al Gregory, and he said, "When can you start?" I said, "Anytime." He said, "Be back in 30 minutes. So 30 minutes later, I was running camera on the Catherine Willis show, scared to death.
By the seat of their pants in the golden age of television, Haynes Lancaster Jr.'s vision now real and profitable, and he could have stopped there. But Lancaster had other plans to transform Johnson City's television station into a regional powerhouse.
WJHL celebrating 60 years.
Even before WJHL TV went on the air, Haynes Lancaster Jr. knew WJHL's studio on Tannery Knob, the place where so much had happened, was now too small for what needed to happen every day. As the audience grew, so did the sponsors, so did the broadcast operation, which included a larger news staff. In 1958, Lancaster moved his television station downtown and his tower to Buffalo Mountain. In 1965, color. In 1968, the Lancasters sold WJHL TV to Park Broadcasting, but Haynes Jr. stayed on as general manager and brokered two critical deals to move the station forward into the modern era of broadcasting. The first in 1970, something Haynes Lancaster Jr. had wanted to do before his first tower toppled on Tannery Knob. The FCC granted WJHL TV's 22-year-old request to put a transmitter tower on top of Holston Mountain.
Well, we reached, like I said, 5 states. There was Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And if we didn't move to that Holston Mountain, we wouldn't have reached all those people. And the more people you reach, the more valuable is your advertising.
Today, Ed Jones heads WJHL's Master Control. But in September 1970, he was on Holston Mountain, working that day that the tower went live as guests from all around came for a big party. And he was there for the other huge step for WJHL. In 1976, the television headquarters moved to the old Federal Post Office downtown on East Main Street in Johnson City.
We went off the air early that day at the old station, and because we didn't have duplicate equipment, we couldn't have stuff already in place up here just to move into. We had to shut that down, put it in the back of trucks and haul it up here and hook it up and try to get on the air by the next morning at sign-on. So that was a pretty big challenge.
But the WJHL team made it work. A year later, Tony Treadway joined the staff as a sports reporter.
It was quite exciting. It was a great training ground for me because after you get used to meeting hard deadlines, like the 11 o'clock news is not at 11:02, it's at 11 o'clock. So whether you're ready or not, you need to be at the anchor desk and ready to deliver the newscast. But thrilling work, very exciting. It was an exciting time for WJHL. It was an exciting time for America.
By the 70s, local programming was less entertainment and more news and information, as the networks filled primetime with famous shows. Local stations focused on what they knew best, their hometown, and it was back-breaking work.
We had no teleprompters. We had no computers. We had no videotape. Our news was shot with 16mm film. We had to develop it ourselves, and that wasn't easy. It was difficult.
Treadway soon moved from the sports desk to the news desk. With limited viewing options, broadcasters felt the immense weight of the responsibility.
It was appointment television. At 6 o'clock, it was part of the family's tradition. Maybe they're eating dinner while they're watching the news. Maybe they're sitting in front of in their easy chair with a TV tray. But you felt like you were making an impact. You felt as though you had a responsibility to try to be as accurate as you could, despite the fact that there were a lot of challenges back then in news gathering.
The news team became the face of the station. Most in the early days grew up here in the Tri-Cities, and some, like legendary WJHL TV newscaster Bob Lewis, stayed for the rest of their careers. Bob came to WJHL in 1967. When he retired 40 years later, he was like a family to thousands, most who'd never even met him face to face. To his colleagues, he was a dear friend.
When I talk to people in the community about WJHL, maybe like 5 names come to mind. Always the first person that's mentioned is Bob Lewis.
Bob was a pillar. Bob was a steadfast, real, authentic guy. What you saw is what you got with Bob Lewis. And he always tried to do his best. He was a man of great integrity.
Here's Bob Lewis talking about the early days during an anniversary broadcast in 2003.
When WJHL first took on the challenge of bringing daily news updates into your living room, they did so in a much different way than we meet that challenge today. In the beginning, there weren't too many people making it all happen.
The WJHL news staff continued to grow and attracted talent from all across the country. In the late 80s, news anchor and reporter Mary Ellen Plubell, now Mary Ellen Miller, came from New York to Johnson City in a day when everyone had to know how to do it all.
In my very first job in Elmira, New York, I had to shoot the camera. That's another thing you had to do. Come back, edit the video. So when I arrived at JHL, they said, "Do you know how to shoot video?" And I went, no. So don't tell anybody that was a little white lie.
But Mary Ellen Plubell could anchor the news. In those days, she sat next to someone whose presence on WJHL continues to this day.
A lot of people always ask me, why are you here so long? One of the things I have to say, the community is amazing. The people here are just fantastic. They're very supportive. They're very likable people. And I've had very good friendships here in this region. You look at our mountain terrain, this is one of the perfect places in the country to live.
When Mark Reynolds came to WJHL TV in 1984, television weather forecasting wasn't all that different than in the very earliest of days. Big maps with movable magnets, broadcasters using what tools they had to predict the unpredictable mountain weather. But even with the limited capabilities of the weather eye, WJHL TV quickly figured out that weather was critically important to local viewers.
Probably about 1986, we got our first weather computer. I was so excited about that because finally I had a chance to make my own graphics, and that really changed a lot of our weather technology. We had the forecast tools, we had the maps so we could do our own forecasting here at the station. And from then on out, we've just continued to see the increase in technology such as Viper radar.
Not long after Mark Reynolds came, another fresh face who first worked as a cameraman. But a love for anything sports soon made its way on the screen.
It was under the pretenses that, you know, if a sports job opened, the weekend sports job opened, that I would get consideration. And WJHL held up their end of the bargain, and I got an opportunity to do weekend sports, and then several years after that became sports director, and you know, now I've been here almost 30 years.
Through decades of broadcasting, a lot of faces fill the local TV screen. Their stories kept us informed and entertained.
Boogie woogie piggy wiggy, we'll have a hog ball.
And the look through the years has evolved too, to reflect an evolving mission that from the start has placed News Channel 11 in your corner.
People in the Tri-Cities, they know their issues, they know what's going on in their neighborhoods and their communities, and to be a part of that is a very big honor, and it's a responsibility that I don't think any of us here take lightly.
My job is now, I think the station has really made it a point to really look out with the viewers and really evolve with the viewers over the years to say, we know you can get this information at home. We're still going to tell you that, you know, the nuts and bolts every day, but we're also going to go the extra step for you.
We know that we need to get things right. We need to get things to them as soon as possible. And it's quite a responsibility, but it's one that we all enjoy.
6 decades of broadcasting is really 6 decades of people. And that's one of the most remarkable parts of the WJHL TV story. During 6 decades of fast-forward innovation, advances in technology that sometimes make the early days seem make-believe, only 3 people have served as WJHL TV General Manager. Current General Manager Dan Cates, before him, Jack Dempsey, and the first, Haynes Lancaster Jr.
And I think that's a testament to that family's legacy, but also a testament to the work ethic of the hundreds of people that have passed through WJHL in their careers, and have been employed here, and that continue to stand on those principles that Mr. Lancaster started in 1953.
I'm Scott Pelley with the CBS Evening News, congratulating WJHL on 60 years of broadcasting.
This is WJHL's First Call, your morning news from WJHL's First Call.
Since WJHL went on the air 60 years ago, local news, weather, and sports, and local programming has been a backbone of who we are.
Back in the early days, the morning news was called First Call. It looked a lot different. The tools were basic, to say the least.
But while so much has changed, one thing is the same: a commitment to serve the Tri-Cities region by providing quality local television.
WJHL's First Call.
The Lancasters and that family had a vision of seeing what the potential was, and knowing that it was an opportunity to get in on the ground floor of what would one day change the industry and change all of our lives, to where television became part of the family. I think that building a quality television station that was technically sound, that was safe, and that was providing good programming is what the Lancasters had in mind, and that's what they did, and that's what they accomplished.
Well, I'm delighted to see it there, and I just hope they keep the thing in good shape and don't let it get away from them.
When you see how Haynes Lancaster Jr., in the midst of disaster, picked up the pieces and just made it happen, it is truly a remarkable heritage. And then to think of the people who, through 6 decades, came in here every day, turned on the lights, they fired up the camera, they went running when news happened, they hosted shows that brought a little bit of joy into people's lives. It's an honor to be a part of it. It's an honor to be even connected with it. And for me to have grown up watching it, it's pretty special.
I'm so proud of what it has become. And I attribute that to 3 groups. I attribute it to the staff, and I know what a staff goes through, and I'm very grateful. I attribute it to the sponsors, because without the sponsors, no deal. And then the most important group, really, to meet those 3 needs, it is the viewer.
I've been here for almost half of it. This WJHL TV is the community station. The community relies on it. I mean, that's an important consideration, I think. You know, when people are under severe weather or emergency notifications, the first place they tune is WJHL TV. They get their local news, weather, sports here.
I mean, since we've been on the air for 60 years, there have been so many people before me, before Josh, that have really made WJHL what it is. It's that history, it's that tradition, and it is an honor to be a part of that and hopefully keep that going into future years.
I love working for a station that's as old as I am. How often does that happen? But even though we're both old, we're both still hip and happy.
The station really considers this community their home, and they show that day after day, whether it's in the programming or the newscasts. I mean, it all comes to part to the people that make this community so special.
Well, it's an honor to be a part of WJHL. It's the first station in this market, and a lot of great people have come through here, whether they've been on the air or not. And I was honored many years ago when they hired me to be a part of this station.
It's interesting when you look back at the years I've been here, just how we have progressed through the years on the air, watching the stories we cover and the technology we have. It is so much more advanced now. And our station, our community is in so much more need of us helping them. That's why we're in your corner. And it's a wonderful thing for us because we're able to help the community members. We're also able to bring them the latest technology to save lives and weather. And all around in your corner is just such a wonderful thing for this community because we are there for our viewers.
It's pretty incredible when you think about 60 years. Every time I sit in front of a camera, whether it be out in the field reporting live or on the anchor desk, I think about all of the other people who've done the same and have gone into people's homes through their television sets.
I grew up with nothing but WJHL, and I knew from an early age this is where I wanted to work because my folks watched it. My grandparents in Unicoi County, when they could get TV, would watch it. You know, everybody around me, you know, in my whole circle of friends, that's what we watched.
I see the station going nowhere but up. I mean, we continue to do great things, and I know that the people who work here have such a strong work ethic, and they want to make the news as good as it can be for the people who are watching.
The sky's the limit, whether it be for, you know, quality programming to entertain your family, or you know, even more importantly, local news. It's important that a community have a strong, dependable source of local news, and for 60 years, WJHL has been that for the Tri-Cities.